this land is here for you and me.
Important that these questions are raised, and it's very important that we get an answer. Period. Before we continue this process of nation building. I'd also like to say that in the late 70s, after we closed down the Hilo Airport runway, and as a result of our doing that and risking our lives, over $500,000 a year started coming into the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Also, as a result of that, Judge Shunichi Kimura stated that not only was the Hilo, Molokai, and Waimea airports illegally seized by past governors, but that past governors since the 30s had seized Hawaiian homestead land without going to Washington, D.C. while it was a federal act. And according to Judge Kimura, over $600 million was owed to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands for lands that had been seized since the 30s. One of them by Petrie. I was raised across in Kaimukia, Pahoa, and 20th Avenue, right across the street from Petrie Park. So over $600 million was forced to be paid to DHHL at the amount of $30 million a year for 20 years, and in a year or two, that $20 million a year will be out. We shouldn't have to risk our lives in order to get the justice our people deserve. After we closed down the Hilo Airport runway, 50 of us showed up at the State Building in Hilo, raising questions about the ceded lands, the seized lands. The income from those lands at that time were going only to the Department of Hawaiian, was going only to the Department of Education. And in fact, it was Dante Carpenter who reminded the people of Hilo, I'd forgotten myself, some years later, that it was because we showed up at the State Building that the state all of a sudden began to delineate 20% of those resources to go to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Of course, after I became a trustee, to find out that we were only receiving 1.5% of that 20% owed, and I was a trustee for 12 years, and that I negotiated for over 5 years for the $15 million a year, $138 million, okayed by John Waihee during the Waihee administration, and by the state. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these resources and revenues that some trustees have told me belong to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, when we all know that and this building belong to our people. And to be honest with you, I was disturbed when hearing that, if this is true, Trustee Paul was saying that, well, we have spent so much money on nation building, let the people do it themselves. Are you kidding? That's our money you're spending. It costs money to get people to gather together. You can't swim across the ocean inter-island. There are no canoes, hopefully as leaving the state, going out to the world, go back and forth between the islands so that we can communicate with each other and so that we can do our nation building that's so necessary. I would also like to add that you say that you are facilitating nation building. Well, it looks to me in a lot of instances, including a recent trip to Washington, D.C., that you're actually steering the canoe towards nation building. And that's no good. That's not fair. Also, I'm concerned because the delegates that you have proposed, you have no right to propose how many delegates should be a part of the Constitutional Convention. Shouldn't that come from the people? Yes. My daughter is named Ho'oululahui. And the kupuna named her that for good reason. And it's up to you to help us facilitate nation building. We need more time for education before any vote is taken. I'm sure you don't want to have an ignorant populace making this decision. Are people voting blindly? That's not fair, and you know it. I did sign for the roll the day before under duress because I felt it was necessary. But I did it under duress. And a lot of people are acting like I'm a traitor for doing it, but I'd rather be in that constitutional convention, making sure that our people get as much as they can instead of throwing rocks from the outside. I'd like to read you. This is from the United Nations General Assembly on Indigenous peoples, done by Rapporteur James Anaya. This is a 50-page document and relating to the Hawaiian people. It says, Hawaii, also uniquely vulnerable are the indigenous people of Hawaii, having experienced a particular history of colonial onslaught and resulting economic, social, and cultural upheaval. They benefit from some federal programs available to Native Americans, but they have no recognized powers of self-government under federal law, and they have little by way of effective landholding. Their lands, largely having passed to non-indigenous ownership and control with the aggressive patterns of colonization initiated with the arrival of the British explorer James Cook in 1778. Indigenous Hawaiians have diffuse interests in lands ceded, I say seized, to the United States and then passed to the state of Hawaii under a trust that is specified in the 1959 Statehood Admission Act and now managed by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. 65. Remarkably, the United States Congress in 1993 issued an apology to Native Hawaiians on behalf of the people of the United States for the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii on January 17, 1893, with the participation of agents and citizens of the United States, end of quote. The apology recognized that the overthrow resulted in the suppression of, quote, inherent sovereignty of the Native Hawaiian people, end of quote, and called for reconciliation efforts. The call for reconciliation, however, remains unfulfilled, while a growing movement of indigenous Hawaiians challenges the legitimacy and legality of the annexation of Hawaii following the overthrow, as well as the process by which Hawaii moved from its designation as a non-self-governing territory under United Nations supervision to being incorporated into the United States as one of its federal states in 1959. In the meantime, indigenous Hawaiians see their sacred places under the domination of others, and they continue to fare worse than any other demographic group in Hawaii. In terms, it's almost power, in terms of education, health, crime, and employment. I know you said wrap it up, Madam Chair, but I felt that this United Nations document should be on the record.
And we hope that you will join us with the discussion with other experts in that area.
Anaya, right, he was here several years ago. At least he's speaking some truth, in spite of the fact that the 50 pages on indigenous people, we only have 3 paragraphs. But
you want to get a copy, give me that.
fine, I'll be happy to give it to you. It's the United Nations, James Anaya. As a matter of fact, my nephew's, right, it's recent 2012. My nephew's close friend is a part of this committee, is in Geneva, and we're moving back to New York, and I think we should, she's interested in coming to talk to us. Mahalo.
Thank you.